Okay, I'm going to record this, so the audio will get recorded, just so that I don't have to repeat myself again. Okay, so currently on the Moodle page, there's the module handbook. That's the correct module handbook for this year. You'll know that because it says 15/16 on it. Deadlines are accurate. 27th of May is the...
was that 3D one accurate in the end?
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
The handbook, or the deadlines.
The deadline.
Yeah, your end of your first semester should have been, your visual effects should have been like the week finishing the 15th of January. That was the end of the semester because the 18th was the first day of the second semester.
So it was actually later.
No, I asked John. He said it was 22nd.
Yeah, John set his date as the 22nd. You know, so you had like a week longer than you needed to. Well, you should have had really, but it's neither here nor there.
It didn't help out that much.
Okay. So the module introduction. Just hide that one away because it's going to irritate me. So what we're going to try and do this morning with the little bit of time we've got, we'll quickly discuss the module outcomes and requirements. You can ask me questions. Obviously, you should be quite familiar with a module because you saw what the third years were doing last year, or saw what they had to do while you were doing the work.
It seems quite self-explanatory.
Yeah, it's probably easier than what you had to do last year in some respects, technical terms anyway. You know, you were maybe allowed more leniency on design, whereas they were probably allowed a bit more leniency on technical understanding. I want you to find reliable sources of inspiration for web-based portfolios and analyze examples in terms of both technical and aesthetical qualities, looking at things like the conventions, current design trends. I'm going to set you some independent study to develop initial ideas for portfolio themes and styles to present next session when you first come in. Okay, so the module outcomes, which obviously you can get in the module handbook. I will flick across that in a minute. You're going to demonstrate a breadth and depth of awareness and of understanding of a range of design principles. So they're the principles that really you should have encountered in, say, combined digital applications, digital image production, and such like. Techniques and constraints related to web-based portfolio production. So you're going to demonstrate that awareness and understanding both in practical terms by applying them, and then more academic terms in terms of an essay report, critical report, I think is the actual assignment title, where you will look at existing examples of portfolio design, maybe even historical. You don't really need to go too far into history, but this is just very much a kind of like an in-depth analysis of existing practice. At the same time, therefore, you will be critically evaluating existing professional examples of web-based portfolios, applying that knowledge of technical design qualities. So to show your understanding, when you're evaluating examples, you will obviously be killing two birds with one stone. That's your first assignment, essentially, those two outcomes, although they do crop up in the last assignment as well. You'll produce a web-based portfolio applying understanding of related technologies, considering technical constraints and audience needs. And then you will critically evaluate a production considering the client requirements, which you set yourself, but you should put down in set in stone nice and early on, technical constraints and audience needs. So I will just skip across to...
So if we write a little brief for ourselves.
That's the idea. You're going to write your own brief. I will review it.
My client's a white web page. Hello.
I've seen some designs like that, where it's white with big, bold, like.
Quite a few of them do it a bit like that. Some of them successfully. Okay, so it's a 20 credit module. Obviously, this is wrong. It's at level 6.
Why is it always highlighted?
It's highlighted because it's actually a field. So I'll change the version on Moodle to that. Don't ask me why it's a form field. I can't remember. Someone else came up with the template for the module handbooks at the college, and then I just amended it to look good, or better at least. I think the rationale is pretty self-explanatory. You're finishing your third year of your degree. It's common professional practice to have a portfolio across media, whether that be if you work in audio as a discipline, whether you work in image as a discipline, whether you work in web as a discipline, film, whatever. Getting yourself out there and promoting yourself, self-promotion is something that has really taken off since, say, what was labelled Web 2.0, really, when it became social. Everyone started having portfolios. Yeah, it's pretty easy. You can get, people who still use paper-based portfolios. People who did film always had showreels, but now it's just making it a bit more accessible and easier to share around, easier to find. And so really this needs to coincide with live conference and exhibition. You will get access to some web space again. Last time you had subdomains of your own, but I think this time
We buy our own.
Yeah, I just have a domain.
you've got a domain. Well, we could host it for you, and you can transfer it over if you want.
Yeah.
If you want to use your own server, then that's fine. We'll still need a copy of it on our servers somehow. So it's up to you if you want to transfer the domain across. If you want us to buy you a domain,
I think it sort of looked better from the portfolio if it said nigeldarling.co.uk instead of.
Can you have nigeldarling.co.uk?
yes, you can redirect.
I could have curtisjarling.co.uk.
You can redirect I've got adamcorkett.co.uk.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't really use it very much. I'll show you. I might, alongside this module, try and find time to do some work to my own portfolio because it really needs some work. I could do with some work on it. It's like best intentions, road to hell, and all that kind of thing. So you'll be given space. You've still got time. It's not a long time. You've still got time really to produce something pretty impressive. So let's just focus on the assignments.
Web application.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first couple of weeks, last week included, although there was no one around, is just to look at examples of portfolios, to point you in directions, to start you with your critical analysis, start you thinking your ideas. You want your ideas nice and early. This needs to be a smooth project. You've got too much going on elsewhere, for this to become a bit of a broken wheel, I suppose. So we will touch on things such as image optimization, video optimization, audio optimization, for obvious reasons, so that you can make sure that you've kind of optimized your content ready for your website so that it runs efficiently. It's probably something you've maybe not done for quite some time. We'll look at web technologies, predominantly HTML5, maybe a bit of PHP, certainly a fair amount of JavaScript for interaction, and also be looking at CSS. I think really we should be looking at things like animation and more interactive elements. You guys might wind up working in something like jQuery, but I'm going to be showing you in like vanilla side of things, so you get a bit more of a detailed understanding. 15th of February is obviously half term, so I haven't got any plans for a session that week, although I will be in for probably 2 days at some point in that week. You can always come in and get individual tutorials at that time. We will still look at sort of plugins to a certain extent, but I'm going to thin out the amount of Flash that we do this year and focus nearly entirely on HTML5.
Doesn't Flash like non-existent?
The thing with Flash is, it's losing support in web browser. It's pretty much dead in that respect. Adobe have pretty much revised the way it's going to be, and it's going to be called something else going forwards. So it's unclear what's going to happen with the product and specifically the language. It'll still exist because there's an open source framework. It's still an excellent tool for building stuff, especially, say, for instance, desktop. The benefits are this. you can still build in Flash, and you can still target multiple platforms at once with one design. So you can output to, say, iOS, you can output to Android, and God knows why you'd want to, but you could also output to BlackBerry, I think. So you can produce something that's to work in web, it's supposed to work on desktop, and it's supposed to work on different platforms at once. HTML5 still isn't as refined as it should be to be taking over what Flash essentially did. But there we are. It's now pretty much the turning point has happened. It's now all HTML5. That is definitely the way it's going to be for web. It's likely to be the way going forward for desktop to a certain extent, because now you've got things like Chrome browser allowing you to build applications that run in a kind of pseudo desktop environment. They're not running on the desktop in that they are running in the browser. They're extensions for a browser. They're plugins for a browser. They're no different to what Flash was, really, in that respect. Except they don't offer this kind of security holes that maybe Flash supposedly did, along with Java and everything else that you use as a third-party piece, and eventually, probably, everything else to come. So we will look at APIs to a certain extent, although we covered a bit of that last year. So I was thinking, the stuff that was useful last year, the Twitter stuff, the Facebook stuff, that's probably worth revising again, just because that would be quite useful for you to have some kind of commentary system in your portfolios, perhaps, or at least to know how to do that again. You'll present your final designs before you're actually going live, or when you're even developing them, I suppose, to the group. You'll get group crit and peer feedback. We'll go off for Easter. You'll be working most of Easter, I expect. You'll still have access to the computers here if you need them, but I think pretty much everyone's got their own machines. You don't really need much beyond Notepad and a browser if you're desperate. And I think most of you have got access to some kind of version of Adobe, haven't you? So you'll be working in the same environment as we are here.
Creative Cloud.
You've got Creative Cloud. Okay. Do a bit more HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but to be honest, the last kind of 5 sessions towards the end of the semester are intended to be more about supporting you with your own individual endeavors. Because by that point, by the first week after Easter, you should already be building or trying to build and coming to terms with it, ideally before Easter. Don't forget, your conference is pegged down as being, what date did I set that for that? It was something like the second Saturday in May.
It's now Friday.
Why is it a Friday?
Gareth finished it.
For God's sake.
I think he did.
Well, it's up to you guys. A Friday is...
We're on Friday because it actually people in.
People are coming on a Saturday because it's a weekend. It's in the town centre.
No, but we'd have students and stuff there.
Oh, you mean force the students to come?
Yeah, essentially the civil doesn't
You
get.
can still force the students to come on a Saturday.
No.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised.
I wouldn't come in this Saturday.
You'd have to come in.
Oh, yeah. I still wouldn't come in, even if I had to.
He says that, but he does, doesn't he? He's quite a good egg.
Yeah, it just Skype.
No, I'm bad egg.
No, you're not.
It's just Skype the conference, to be honest.
Yeah, we could stream it, I suppose.
Yeah.
There's 2 sides of it, right? If you want employers to be there, Friday's not necessarily a great day unless you're going to you need to be speaking to employers now for that. Anyway, that's beside the point. I'm getting ahead of ourselves. So you've got an essay of 1,500 words. It's worth 30%. It does the first 2 outcomes, as explained. Your portfolio or your portfolio website, including a 1,000-word reflective essay, the 3,500 words is an equivalence. I have to give an equivalence for practical projects. So
I always wonder what that would be roughly.
just basically saying the same as the 70%. It's worth two-thirds, or just a little bit more than 2/3 of the module. And so quite a lot of it's handed over to the portfolio.
Is the module as a whole 5,000 words?
5,000 at this level is what your equivalence would be.
Yeah.
And there's a certain amount of hours that you would give to that. So every module is calculated in a 200-hour learning load, and usually there's anywhere around 100 hours, 120 hours independent study expected. So let's say, for argument's sake, that it's a 100-hour learning load, and you've got 70 hours that are supposed to go towards your practical. Then how many weeks' work is that? It's 2 weeks solid full time, but you're ever going to manage that. So if 6 hours a week for the period of the module, something like 6 or 7 hours. Yeah.
I can't really do weekends.
You working?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I like them.
Yeah, everyone
That's
needs
why
one.
I'm landscape.
So your essay is, as explained in the learning outcomes, the critical analysis of the design principles in existing professional and graduate portfolios. You'll probably be able to find quite a few graduate portfolios around this point in time, because obviously there'll be other graduates working at the same time, and there'll be last year's graduate stuff probably still live if you know where to look, or you can try and find them. Look at them in terms of graphic design and typography. Look at them in terms of technical and user experience. Those are interlinked. So, what have they attempted in technical terms? Has it worked? Does it add to the user experience? Does it detract from the user experience? Because obviously that would have an effect on how people perceived your work, I suppose. It should lead you to draw your conclusions for your own ideas, and perhaps you should discuss that in your essay a little bit, just to mention what you're taking away from the research that you've done. The second assignment is quite clear. You will produce a portfolio website. Obviously, it needs to be informed by current design trends. So that means it could kind of follow current conventions, or it could build upon current conventions. It certainly needs to be professionally presented. It can't be so naive as maybe the stuff that we did last year. It needs to be polished on the outward sides, at least. So you need to consider what you think is achievable with your current skill set, and how much time you can allow yourself to develop new skills to achieve certain things, how much you're going to take on. You need to ensure you set yourself a brief at the project's outset, which I would like to see and discuss with you. It should outline your requirements and the limitations, I suppose, that you might face, deadlines, that kind of thing. You should certainly keep as much contact with each other as possible. This is a competition between you guys. Who can produce the best one?
What do we win?
A job. You need to have a friendly, competitive spirit about this. It's like you want to do better than each other. Yeah, good. You want to do better than each other, but you also at the same time want to support each other through this, because as a collective, you will have the knowledge to do more than you can do individually.
Yeah.
Well, I do have my notes on the Google Drive for you.
You present informally to your peer group as set out in the learning schedule. Your chosen format will be based on the requirements of the brief that you set yourself. Almost certainly going to be in HTML5 there, really. Or some derivative. You'll plan extensively. This is important. Your planning will have, a fair amount of weighting overall in your assignment. You might even be able to use the planning, especially if it's a high enough standard, in your portfolio as a presentation of, your design process, your practical processes. It needs to meet professional standards, so there should be consideration for legal and ethical in terms of content, I suppose, and in terms of what you use. If you bring in anything that's not original or not your own, then obviously you've got to have permission to use it. The preference is to be as original as possible with this. It's showing you off. That said, there are a lot of portfolios out there that just basically bring in stuff that already exists, and that is kind of the way it's done professionally these days. They use open source stuff, they build upon it. So long as you've done enough for it to be your own, I suppose. Plus, if you build things from scratch, from ground up yourself, you'll get a better understanding. You'll know how to fix things when they go wrong. If you take from code libraries, you usually find that it's very difficult to debug because it's not your code. It's not your way of working.
You can do it anyway.
Yeah, it's wrong morally.
Furious.
Um,
That makes sense.
a live subdomain is, I'm not sure if I'm going to turn it into a subdomain, but you'll have a folder with FTP individual to each other. And we'll probably put it on the, I need to move the East Riding Media over, but I've got a year's worth of hosting left on it. And I can't create any new subdomains on it. So I'm not quite sure whether we'll put it on East Riding Media, which is where the website for, yeah, that's where it's going. It'll have to be like that. Your website for your conference, which is called what? Have you got a name yet still?
Unity.
Unity.
We were going to have Trinity, then Andy came along.
Okay.
But then we can think of anything else. And now it's just like, what big Unity makes.
Okay, assignment 1, 29th of April, just after Easter. 27th for the 5th, so that's the end of the semester, for your reflections and the actual submission of your website. Assessment criteria. So in your essays, you get 35% towards your understanding of design principles, techniques, constraints, and 35% towards your critical analysis of existing professional outcomes. So if you do the two things together, the bulk of it comes there. You get 20% for your background reading and research in this, which is quite a chunk, and 10% for your literary style and presentation. No, I usually give 10 for literary style and presentation, but sometimes I only give 10 for background reading, depending on what we're assessing. On your portfolios, I'm giving you 10 then for your understanding, so that's the application of design principles. 10 for your critical evaluation of existing professional examples. So that is really when you're critically evaluating your own production. If you can fit in analysis of your own work against existing professional examples, you will tick those 2 boxes. And then 60% on the portfolio itself in terms of building a professional portfolio to standards. So that's the module handbook. Okay, and just get that up. So, considerations when it comes to building your portfolio. It's like, what work is your best work? How close to professional standards is it? What skills do you have now, and capacity do you have to improve it? I would usually give the advice that in a portfolio, you want about 6 pieces to show off your work. Although other schools of thought would say you want a range. I think there's definitely, you can definitely have too much, but it should certainly be your best stuff. So like if you've got 4 or 5 pieces, then you just about get by. If it's 2 or 3, it doesn't look good at all. So yeah. Even then,
if you have one piece of work,
it looks a bit thin on the ground for a portfolio. You know, your portfolio should reinforce it. It's like it could be a fluke, it might not be your work. Show your range. And you need to analyse to be sure that you know how your work stands up to the competition as well, I suppose, which is part of your critical analysis report. That's the whole point of doing it, really. So it's looking at your work against professional examples and saying, okay, right, how does my video stand up to this? How does my audio stand up to this? How does my image stand up to this? And then saying, well, if it doesn't stand up, then yeah, you could say, I'm not going to include it. My advice is fix it. Redraft it, redo it, rework it. Use these first few weeks when you're doing research to do that. Use the research and analysis of professional examples to help you see what's wrong with your work, if there's anything wrong with it, or if there's anything can be improved. Remember, you did your digital image in the first year. You did your audio in the second year, you did your interactive in the second year. You can improve it. Plus, if nothing else, trends have changed, so perhaps it's going to be less, even if it was the best then, it might be less relevant now, I suppose. It might have aged, especially if you kind of like followed trends before. It might have aged a bit. You need to prioritize. You're going to have dual time scales on this, really. You've got your professional time scale, and then you've got your retirement time scale, and these both need to be considered. So you've got live conference and exhibition, which is a concurrent module. It's going on at the same time, and you require a website to fit in with the conference website, really. So that's something there has to be dialogue, really, about how that's going to be put together and who's going to create it and whether you're going to outsource that or whatever. But your site is going to have to sit within that because that's how people are going to access it. So the module deadline might be a little bit later. It might give you a little bit of time to maybe take on some peer responses, take on some audience responses, and then maybe tweak it a bit before the actual deadline. You really need something in place quite a bit before the deadline, a couple of weeks before, maybe even before then, because don't forget, if you're promoting the conference and you want people to come, they might check out the conference website and then look at the portfolios first and then see the work and decide whether they want to come. And you should consider that in your marketing strategy, really. Professional production might continue alongside. That should really be your showcase, really, for the website. Whatever you're doing, it's this year's current stuff. Your 3D VFX as well. Does it need polishing? Can you do a version of it for the website which is, a bit more shiny? I know that there wasn't as much emphasis for the assessment purposes on having decent modeling in, but it might be worth considering whether you can put something together with a better model or with better textures, with a longer render time or whatever after this assignment. So how strong is it professionally? You could swap that out if it's not what you're going to specialize in, as long as you've got strong enough work elsewhere. But bear in mind, this is something you've done this year. It should really be one of your best pieces. Worrying. You've got to think about the audience in your design. So who are they going to be? Well, potential employers and clients. These really are uninterested in seeing your best work. It's fine to assume that they will look at your work on a larger screen, probably. You're talking about, people who work in the industry, they're probably going to be working on large screens themselves. So if they look at it at work, they'll look at it on a larger screen. However, if they look at it at a conference, they might pick it up on a small screen. And so you definitely need something that is a bit responsive, that targets like maybe a portrait and a landscape ratio at the very least. Consider the actual exhibition. What's the relationship between your portfolio and the exhibition? When people go to that exhibition, how are you going to get them to engage with your portfolio? We're on home turf this year, so this should be the best conference and exhibition that there's been. There should be in terms of resources, it's not going to be a problem. Remember, design trends. Design trends are important, and you should be somewhere near to, unless your work is exceptional, in which case try and be a trendsetter, perhaps.
Always aim for the best.
It's very difficult, isn't it? You need to kind of show that you've got an understanding.
Trends are so stupid at times.
It doesn't have to be a trend, always, for every outcome. But for this, perhaps it does, because you're kind of showing that you're forward thinking, progressive, got a finger on a pulse. When you're working for a client, you might be able to argue for them that actually it needs to be a timeless design. For someone else, it might need to be something that's really far forward. It's all down to audience need. But you're trying to show that you are, something new, something to be looked at. It's like a here I am kind of thing. So you have to bear that in mind. Also need to consider the construction methods, obviously, so what languages are you going to need to use? How comfortable are you with them now? How quickly can you learn what you need to do? There's enough time in 12 weeks to do, to become an absolute
beast.
god at code, yeah, if you needed to. But I'm not asking you to become a god at code. Just good enough to make it.
I just descended from heaven.
He's learned a fair bit, to be fair. And the feasibility, I suppose, is a key thing. How feasible is it for you to achieve it in the time you've got? And you've got other things going on, so that takes us back to timescales and prioritizing as well. So you have or had 20 minutes, which I'll now turn into 15 minutes.
Do we have, what's the lesson after this?
You just got a slot for independent study with me, which I want this done now. We've got other things to do. Yeah, so you can have your 20 minutes. Good point. We can run into independent study. 20 minutes to collate a list of a range of sources for examples of portfolio websites, considering both technical and aesthetics. You'll probably find a handful of portfolios on the way through this, because obviously how are you going to judge the reliability unless you do? So just keep a note of those too. Drawing conclusions of reliability include all sources encountered, but highlight those that will produce consistently useful results. Okay, so I make it nearly 10 o'clock.
You just say till 1:15.
Okay, till 1:15 is fine. Yes?
Can we just move on to this?
Yeah, the docs could as well, but it's just because they've been off. Just move the laptop. They're working off the Wi-Fi. It's not like you need them charging up. I'll just pause this for a second, hopefully.
The background doesn't move, but the things we can do. And there's some circles.
Hang on. Right, okay. So the task was to collate a list of a range of sources for examples. So what have you got in terms of sources? Rather than just examples of portfolios, what I'm thinking of are sites where you can regularly find.
I didn't use Pinterest in this instance, but Pinterest.
Pinterest.
Awards, or whatever it's called, and Behance.
Pinterest, Behance, awards, anything? Awards. You get anything different? I've not written that on the screen. Awards was when you went.
No, actually, I went through. There wasn't one. You're getting that on the head.
Is it Behance? Behance is something like
Behance is.
How's that?
Behance is.
Behance is essentially a portfolio site. Okay, so one called Blurb. Not familiar with it, but that's another one to add to the list then. Okay, we'll have a look at it in a minute. So places that I would go to or I would recommend: awards. There's a portfolio section on there dedicated just to portfolios, which is really quite useful. The Creative Block is quite a good blog style site that is always about design trends, and they've also got a few articles on portfolios. I think there's one more recently in January this year, which is quite a useful one, 20 portfolios. The Creative Review magazine is always a good place to look for starting points. They bring out an annual every year, so by looking at that, you might find people that are the movers and shakers, I suppose, and then from that, identify where their portfolios will be and take a look at them. If they've been held up on a pedestal in something like the annual, then chances are they've probably got a pretty decent portfolio site to back it up. Net Awards is another one. It's a bit like awards. They do portfolio sets. There's a UK site called Creative. There's a UK site called Creative Pool, which is more kind of like a place to find employment and to put your own portfolio up, but it's also a place where you can find other people, I guess. Behance is starting to get quite a good reputation for being a good place to go. It's a similar kind of thing to Deviant, I suppose, apart from it's more focused on graphic design rather than on art. And then I would also look at degree show websites, because that's going to be a reliable place to find something in comparison. So it's like, okay, so who's had degree shows last year? because obviously this year's degree share websites will only just be getting constructed probably, and the portfolios might not be finished, but it's worth having a look and see what you can find. But it's reliable in the sense that you know that certain universities are universities to watch. So if you find out their portfolios, it's a good place to start. So when you were looking at these sites, you had a little discussion then that I was hoping to get on to, which is what kind of current design trends did you come across when you were looking at websites then? What did you see?
The one page, yeah.
Single page?
Yeah.
Very like bare bones, sort of colour scheme.
Bare bones in colour.
White and sort of, light greys.
So light colours. Simple.
Obviously minimal.
Minimal.
Right.
Bloody hate that way.
Yeah, that's what a lot of them are.
Yeah, they are very sparse or minimal.
I mean, let's say you're given 1080 pixels and 1920 pixels the other way. You may as well use them all. Not use 5 of them and say, oh, yeah, that's not wrong. It's like a dancer on a stage. A better dancer is someone who uses the entire stage and not just standing in the middle. I think that's the same way.
That's true, but the problem with the dance, the problem with that analogy is that, okay, you've got a dancer on a stage, it's a fixed size, but what if the dancer therefore then has a stage that changes in size?
It gets smaller and smaller.
Or bigger and bigger.
But then the dancer just has to adapt.
So the site has to adapt.
Yeah, but there's a site adapting, and then there's a site you go in the middle, so when it shrinks.
There might be a minimum width that they can work within, and would they expand beyond that unless they knew that they had a stage that size, I guess? Anything else?
Boxes.
Boxes.
A lot of them you just click on Word and it's just a load of boxes. It's like this is.
They're like squares, boxes.
Yeah, like squares, and you just hover over it, and then it darkens, and then you click on it, it takes you towards that one's pretty much every single one. Here's an example now.
Bold typography.
Bold typography. Okay, so obviously when I was doing this, I had a look myself as well. Some of the things that I came up with that you probably would have covered then. I've noticed on a lot of them these days to have animations, sometimes transitions, and I've even seen quite a few sites with GIFs, massive GIFs as well. I was looking at a portfolio site where they'd taken video content and put it inside of a GIF. So they were quite laggy on that basis. Quite a lot of use of sound and video these days. So like full screen video as a background on some of them, or bringing video. There's certainly more movement involved now.
I hate sound on websites.
People find it irritating, but I think in a portfolio site it might be acceptable. Maybe what you can do is you can give them an option at the start to have sound on or sound off or something. The level of interaction is more complex than say just a simple click on a hyperlink these days. They've got responsiveness to interaction, like hover over, and then if you click on something, there's some kind of transition in between. So it's a bit more like a DVD menu rather than just a basic bare bones site these days. They're heavily image driven these days, very much about visuals.
Man's text.
But you'll attract the people you want to attract.
Yeah, people who read lots.
Really all right.
They tend to have strong visuals and colour themes. The ones I've been looking at have been whilst they've been like a few colours in the sense that you said are simple, they have been very bright. So, it's like yellows, oranges, quite funky colours. The typography, and they use a lot of web fonts these days. Typography has been considered more and more. So the positioning, the typefaces that they're using, they can be quite bold in what they're choosing, certainly.
Choose your cats, no?
Minimalist, definitely. A lot of them are minimalist. They're leaving a lot of white space, sometimes in a positive way and sometimes in a negative way. and they're definitely all becoming responsive. And I think the reason that portfolio sites, whilst they never used to need to be responsive, become responsive is because you've maybe got people in agencies who flick through sites on tablet device, and like I say, in an exhibition scenario where they come across your work and they quite like it and they want to find out more, and they might just do that on their mobile phone. So that kind of stuff needs to be considered more now. So when we're looking at analysis of existing portfolios, which you're going to do in a minute, I'd like you to take down the following questions. So how well does the site portray the work? You could just take a picture of this, I suppose. What is the experience like from a user's perspective? Are there any differences cross-browser, cross-display? Are there any technical issues or areas of technical excellence? What techniques have been employed in the site, to make it impressive, I suppose? And evaluate the graphic design and typography. How well does it communicate and how aesthetically pleasing is it? So the site that I've picked for this activity, you might have seen, I don't know, is called MelanieDavid.com. So if you go to that site, you can complete this activity for 11. We'll pick it up when we're going to BS15 afterwards for the final part of that. So essentially, I want you to look at that site. Did you get the link name, yeah?
Do you mind if I just set up some machines that were taken off in the previous sessions?
I don't mind, yeah.
Just because I know I'm not going to get time later.
Oh, I went on this one.
Yeah, I went on this one, obviously. So the questions are there. It's not a massive site, so it's achievable to sort of like do a quick kind of run through of it in 20 minutes.
Just write up the notes. Got to write the notes and notepad.